Hey, Pennsylvania, it's wine o'clock on Wine Time, PA. Join Rob, Holly, and Steve as they explore their home state of Pennsylvania and all the wonderful wineries it has to offer. Each month, they take a journey tasting the wines of PA. If you're able, pour a glass of your favorite wine and join us now for Wine Time.
Welcome again to Wine Time, PA. I'm one of your hosts, Holly, and as always, I'm joined today by my husband, Steve.
Hello there.
And our fellow wine-loving friend, Rob.
Hello, hello.
In this episode, we will be talking about Mount Nittany Winery. As usual, we will discuss the experience as a guest visiting the winery and also the wines that we enjoyed. We should note this one is a little different for us, as we tend to visit this winery a few times a year because of its proximity to where we all live. However, we made a point to go in April of 2024, and the information from today is from that time frame. Okay, Rob, kick us off and tell us a little bit more about Mount Nittany.
Kickoff. I get what you did there because Mount Nittany is located in Center Hall, which is just outside of State College, home to Penn State University, nicknamed the Nittany Lions. Mount Nittany is nestled in the side of Mount Nittany, and you will notice a lot of things reference to that. Joe Carroll was an amateur winemaker in the 1970s, learning from a time when there were only about 30 wineries in the entire state. Joe and his wife Betty purchased 65 acres of land on the side of Mount Nittany in 1983 and planted some grapes in 1987. After a visit to Australia in 1988, they returned with a vision for their property and opened the winery in 1990. The winery is now run by their children, Linda and Steve. They are open 6 days a week, being closed on Mondays. They do grow some of their grapes on site, mostly ones for their sweeter wines. The rest of their wines come from different places across the U.S. Other places noted were Erie in Pennsylvania, but also the states of California, Washington, and New York. Reservations are not needed to visit. However, you can make free reservations on their website to guarantee a seat either inside, outside on their covered deck, or along their pond. They do have an outdoor private pavilion with a fire pit that you can rent for a group up to 20 people. This does require a reservation and is not free. You may want to consider making a reservation if you're going to be in the area on a big event weekend, such as a Penn State football game or graduation. They also do have some other events on the weekends like food and wine pairings, so best to check their website ahead of time before you visit.
Yeah, I agree. The reservations are free, and it never hurts to make them. I know there's times where we visited, and we've gotten there, and we've had a reservation, and it was empty, so it didn't really be needed. But then there's other times where we've shown up, and we didn't have a reservation, and it was packed, and it was kind of hard to find a seat. So I do agree it's free. If you're going to be there, especially on a weekend where it's nice or it's a big event, I'd make a reservation because especially if you want to sit outside in nice weather, because that's one of my favorite things. But I'm going to let Steve talk a little bit about the aesthetics of the winery and the setting.
Yes, it's tucked away from all the hustle of the nearby and busier State College area. You'll pass more and more farms as you approach the incline of the mountain and take a one-lane road onto the winery property, flanked on both sides by grapevines. For tastings, you'll head up to the left side of the big building on the property into what they call the Vintner's Loft for your tasting and indoor seating. On the way, you'll notice plenty of nice outdoor seating on the big covered deck with many tables. It's just a nice place to grab some shade and hide from rain if you're not there on a nice day. You'll also notice this beautiful pond behind the building, surrounded with small tables and picnic tables to enjoy on a nice day. The outdoor space is some of my favorite. Between the pond and the lively frogs, fish, and dragonflies to the beautiful forest that starts spreading up the mountain, it is just a serene spot where you can sit and enjoy a glass of wine and connect with nature.
I even saw some deer running through the fields when I was there on my last visit.
Oh, that's
so
cool.
nice.
It's really nice.
While we have not done this ourselves, there is a trail that goes up into the mountain if you really want to earn those wine calories yourself. Inside the tasting room, there is a variety of seating options that can accommodate large and small groups. There are pictures hung throughout of the local area that really embrace all the natural surroundings. On the far end, there is a stunning stone fireplace that is warm and inviting on a cooler day. Next to the tasting room is the sales room, which has all the wines they offer, including some in a cooler if you want to take a bottle straight to dinner. There is another building on property called the Treehouse, which is used for private events only and can hold up to 40 people. Years ago, this was actually the tasting room until they moved it, which I just kind of think is a smart move because it allows more space for tastings.
Yeah, I liked it when they moved the tasting room. I agree. It was a good, smart move on their end. And this setting is just gorgeous. If you got to check out our pictures on social media on it because it's beautiful there. All right, let's talk about how tastings work. You can purchase a bottle, a glass of wine, or you can do a flight. When you sit down, a staff member will usually bring you a piece of paper with their wines for you to select for your tasting. So make sure you go inside the winery first so you can get this tasting sheet. If you're sitting inside, they tend to come pick it up from you. If you want to sit outside, you leave it with them and they'll usually bring you the drink that you ordered or your flight, or you can wait for it. They usually will take a credit card to hold as payment until you're done and ready to check out, and you just have to go to the register when you're ready to leave. All flights are custom flights and you get 4 choices. You can pick between a small flight, which is a total of about 3.4 ounces between the 4 wines, or you can do a larger flight, which is about a total of 6.8 ounces of wine. If you have a hard time visualizing how much wine that is, they do have a wine barrel set up inside on a display that shows you how much you get for each size. They have about 25 wines available. Their tasting sheet is broken into categories, and each has the number of following wines in each: 4 dry whites, 1 dry rosé, 4 dry reds, 5 semi-dry wines, 1 semi-sweet wine, and it's a blush, 5 sweet, 5 fruit. Overall, I really like how they break down the tasting sheet. It's a neat, easy to read columns, and they have really nice descriptions of the wines too.
Yeah, I too enjoyed their tasting sheet. The descriptions are spot on, and they have all the information that you generally want and need when you're doing a tasting. I even like the fact that the back is blank because that's where all my notes go. The price range for the wines is $16 to $24, with about half of the wines at the $16 price point. The price goes up a bit as the sweetness goes down. They offer a 5% discount if you buy at least 6, and 10% discount if you buy a case or more. This is actually something we haven't mentioned in other podcasts, but most wineries do offer a discount if you purchase at least half a case. This could be good for when you want to stock up on your favorite, especially if you have a love for a particular vintage. And vintage is really just a term used for the year the grapes were picked. Because grapes never grow the same each year, particularly because of climate and weather, there can be variations in the taste profile and the aromas of the wine when produced. Winemakers do an amazing job keeping these wines consistent from year to year despite these differences, but each year's wine can offer something a bit unique also.
So let's talk a little bit about some of the other food and drink options at Mount Nittany. When they give you the wine list, they will usually give you a little sheet with snack options that include things like meat, cheese, pretzels, and even a bag of chocolates. They do allow outside food, and we've taken and have seen other people take their own food there all the time. Especially if you're going to take advantage of the outdoors, it's easy to take along a nice picnic to enjoy while you're having some wines out by the pond out back. For the non-wine drinkers in your group, they do offer a selection of local craft beers from nearby Axman Brewery. For non-drinkers, they do offer locally made root beer from Otto's Pub and Brewery, which is quite good. They do offer bottles of water for sale, but they also have a little self-service water station if you just want a small cup of water. I also want to point out that dogs are welcome to join you on the property as long as they're kept on leashes.
Yeah, that's always nice.
And you probably have to keep them outside.
I would think so, yes.
Yeah. All right, time for wine, and let's discuss the wines themselves. For this part, each of us has narrowed it down to our top 3 recommendations. As always, these are based on our own personal preferences. Remember, when it comes to wine, don't worry about what other people think, just drink what you love. Also a reminder, we are not being paid or endorsed by Mount Nittany or any other wine organization for our recommendations. This is our own personal experience, and the opinions we give are our own. Steve is going to go first this time and tell us his number 3 pick.
Thanks, Holly. My number 3 pick is the Tailgate Red.
Good choice.
As the description states, it's a blend of French hybrid grapes. But to be honest, I could not really tell any specific grape myself, so they did a really nice job with the blend. It's at 2.5% residual sugars, so it's not very sweet, and it's got a nice medium body. I got some really nice fruit up front, maybe some cherry or raspberry, and just a little bit of like spicy pepper finish. All the ingredients you'd expect from a nice blend. Overall, it's just a really good semi-red blend, and I say it all the time, I love a good red blend. So this is just a prime example of that.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I thought the tannins in it didn't really exist, but it had a really nice taste. Like there was a little bit of everything in it. Like I got a little bit of fruit, a little bit of vanilla, a little bit of pepper, a little bit of oak, like just a little bit of everything in there. And I thought it just came together nicely, and I enjoyed it also.
Yeah, that's a great pick, Steve. And I'm going to stick with the Tailgate series for my third pick, but I'm going to go with the Tailgate White. This is a semi-dry made from the Geisenheim grape. It had a beautiful medium gold color, great citrus aromas like orange or tangerine. Kind of reminded me almost of a Moscato, but maybe more like a Riesling or one of those other types of grapes out there. It's a nice blend with a medium amount of fruit forward to start, which balanced well with the light or very light amount of acidity in the finish. It was similar to like I said, the Moscato or those other orange flavorings in there, and easy and pleasant to drink on its own, but you could pair it with some chicken or even some spicier dishes like Thai or Chinese foods, and just a solid example of a nice semi-dry white wine.
You say that. We actually did buy a bottle of Tailgate White from the cooler and take it to a nice Thai dinner one night.
See, there you go.
Yeah, I enjoyed the Tailgate White as well, obviously, since we bought a bottle. And it was interesting. I got a lot of the grapefruit out of it, and I noticed like kind of a little bit of a pine aroma. And usually pine kind of deters me a little bit because reminds me of gin, and I'm just not a gin,
Right.
a gin drinker. But in this one, it worked really well. And I actually had almost picked the Tailgate White as well as a favorite. I kept kind of going back and forth between that and another one that day that I'll get to. But so shout out to both tailgates. All right, my number 3 pick is the Mountain Mist. Now, this is a sweet white grape, and it's made from the Niagara grape, which, as we may remind you, that is the one that's used in white grape juice. It smells very grapey, and it tastes that way as well. The residual sugar on it is 9%, and usually when I see one that high, I don't really care too much for it because it tends to be too sweet, but it doesn't taste like sugar to me. The sweetness, to me at least, was all fruit. It was just all that wonderful fruit grape taste. It was like biting into a fresh grape. It felt more like a semi-sweet to me than the sweet category it was under, but obviously that's more about the sugar, not the taste. But I think if you're one that you like a sweet or a semi-sweet, I would give this one a try. And it's just a good one, especially for friends on a hot day. In fact, I think one time the 3 of us shared a bottle outside at Mount Nittany one summer along that pond because it was just perfect for that day.
Yeah, I think I remember that. It's a good wine for sure.
Yeah, and you bring up a good point too. The sweetness scale, sweet, semi, or dry, is really just based on the residual sugar and not how an individual person drinks the wine or feels about the wine. So something with a high residual sugar might taste more like a semi to certain people because of the way their palate works.
Yep.
Yeah, excellent point, Steve. So if we move on to our number 2 picks now, I'm going to go with one that I'm surprised we haven't talked about in previous episodes so far, but it is a standard, and it's the Riesling.
Ah, yes. Love a good Riesling.
Yeah, we haven't talked about too many Rieslings, and I think it's because they're all done so well, we just have a certain expectation of them.
Right, and the reason I picked the Riesling from Mount Nittany as my number 2 pick is if you want an example, a great example of what a typical Riesling is all about, this is the Riesling to get. It had a nice light gold coloring. It's a semi-dry, which I prefer the semi-dries over more of the semi-sweet Rieslings. You had a nice floral aroma with citrus blended in there. You had some of that hints of that petrol smell that you get from the Rieslings oftentimes, but this one was kind of subtle, so it wasn't overwhelming. It was nice and crisp, refreshing to drink. Well balanced between the fruit forward and the start of the drink to the light acidity at the end. And actually, this was maybe a little bit less acidic than many Rieslings. Maybe reason why I like this a little bit more. But it was just a very versatile Riesling, great to drink on its own or paired with your favorite meal or shared with a friend. And like I said, if you want to know what a Riesling is supposed to be, this is the one to get.
Yeah. Very good points, and I agree with that. My number 2 pick is the Nittany Mountain White. It is a semi-dry white wine made with a blend of Cayuga, Saval, and Vidal Blanc grapes. It has a 2.5% residual sugar. It's very smooth with lots of fruit and grape flavor and just a little hint of acidity that I liked. I thought it was very refreshing, and maybe it was me that day, my taste buds can be seasonal. I think being there in the spring, I wanted lighter, fruitier wines that day. So I think that's why, because I kept going between this and the tailgate white. Which one do I like better? And then this one won out that day. But overall, I just really liked it and thought it was a good wine.
Yeah, I agree. I love the Cayuga grape, and the blending of the Saval and the Vidal Blanc just helped keep that sweetness that you normally get with the Cayuga down. It was just a really nice wine.
Yeah. So what was your number 2 pick?
Mine was the Chardonnay,
Ooh.
which is a bit of a surprise because I often say that I'm not a huge fan of Chardonnay, but they offer 2 Chardonnays here. They offer a Chardonnay Reserve, which is oaked, and a Chardonnay, which is unoaked. And that's the one I'm talking about. I'm not a big fan of oak, and so the unoaked bit of this Chardonnay just really drew me in. There were hints of citrus, followed by a bit of apple flavor. It was really smooth and balanced. It was crisp and dry, but that fruitiness in the beginning just made it a really well-rounded Chardonnay. And you still got a bit of that buttery flavor that you normally associate with the oak, but it just made it well-rounded, and I just couldn't enjoy a Chardonnay any more than this, I bet. And the description was spot on.
Yeah, I really like the Chardonnay too. I actually almost listed it as well. I'm with you. It was very crisp and refreshing, and I really like the citrus and the apple notes in it.
Yeah, I'm not a big Chardonnay fan either, but this naked Chardonnay, as they're sometimes called, the unoaked version, wasn't too bad. And I could have a glass or two of that if I was at like a wedding or something. It was pleasant to drink, but it's not something I'm going to gravitate toward. But just so you know, listeners, unoaked sometimes is called naked Chardonnay.
Good to know.
So, Holly, what was your number 1 pick?
All right, number 1 pick. Ready? Guys, brace yourselves. Pinot Grigio.
Wait. You like a Pinot Grigio?
Yeah, that's like Rob picking a Merlot.
Yeah.
Yes, that's sarcasm, listeners, if you're not new to that. I'm finally giving Pinot Grigio its justice, and I actually have to give Mount Nittany credit for actually starting me on my Pinot Gris or Grigio journey. As a wine I was kind of so-so with in the past with limited experience. And then I think a year or two ago we were there visiting, and I looked at their tasting sheet, and it said notes of peach and nectarine. And I was like, that sounds really good today, so I'm going to give it a try. And I'm so glad I did. I just loved it, and I've been obsessed with it ever since. It's been my bar when trying other Pinot Grigios in Pennsylvania as well. I'm kind of comparing them to Mount Nittany's a little bit. Mount Nittany's version has some mineral aromas with some floral and grapefruit notes in the smell. Taste-wise, I get the citrus, they sort of lemon and grapefruit flavor in the beginning. In the middle, my tongue gets some notes of the minerality and some mild creaminess. And then it finishes with that peach and nectarine flavor. It's a little bit more subtle, but I like it. I love the acidity in it. It might be a little high for those of you who don't like acidity, but I really enjoyed it. And it's my favorite wine in Mount Nittany and one I continually go back to.
You do like the Pinot Grigio.
I do love that Pinot Grigio.
Maybe not as much as I like their Moscato.
Yeah.
Steve's picking a Moscato.
That's not a shock either.
Yeah, this is probably the Moscato that also got me onto Moscatos as well. It's sweet like you'd expect from Moscato. It's at 9% residual sugar, but it really doesn't drink that way. It drinks like somewhere between the sweet and the semi-sweet, but I just don't care. It's got this just amazing aroma. I've often taken in that aroma between tasting other wines on my flight just because I enjoy it that much. It has that all-important orange blossom flavor. It's very present, but it's mixed with this apricot where the two play really well together and they don't contrast. The description says that there's also some peaches and pears also. I don't exactly get that, but the balance of fruitiness in this wine just really makes it complete.
I'm going to bring us home and back to more of something we all enjoy, and that's a red dry blend. And I'm picking for my final number 1 pick, the Montage.
Ooh, good choice.
Yeah, that is a good choice.
They list this as a Bordeaux blend, a dry red blend, with Merlot and Cab Sauv, with a bit of the Cab Franc. And I've seen other places do this, where they take a Cab Sauv and blend it with Merlot. That's pretty common, but it's just that touch of Cab Franc that they put in there that puts this one over the top. It's a nice medium to dark red coloring. There's some great aromas in there, maybe some cherries and vanilla, though I couldn't quite place my finger on exactly what this one aroma I was getting in there. It smelled kind of sweet, but it was really good. Also, I was getting a little bit of the hints of the oak in there. These 3 dry reds, the Merlot, the Cab Sauv, the Cab Franc, they will just play well together. Each sip, if you pay attention, you can find something different about it. You can really point out that Merlot, that Cab Sauv, even that Cab Franc. This was just a silky smooth to drink. The day I was there, it was a bit of a milder day, and sitting outside with a room temperature glass of this, it was just perfect. Medium amounts of those tannins, that dry finish to it. Best to drink, again, at room temperature, but maybe even slightly chilled, this would be an excellent wine. And so I'm just going to recommend for my number one pick, the Montage, the red dry blend.
Yeah, it was a good pick. I enjoyed the Montage as well, and I agree with you. It was a good at room temperature. I could see trying a little chilled, maybe an interesting try, but yeah, it's a good wine. All right, so those are our picks. Let's move on to some honorable mentions. I think we all had a couple in to shout out. I'm just going to give a quick shout out. One, to the Cabernet Sauvignon. It's a good Cab Sauv, especially this year's vintage. We've tried it. If this is a wine you like, or if you like dry reds, I highly recommend giving this one a taste. And I also want to give a shout out to the Red Raspberry Sangria. It's a fruit wine, and I don't typically recommend a lot of fruit wines, especially ones with raspberry in them. There's something in my palate that does not like raspberry on wine.
Yeah, I think Holly was force-fed too much raspberry Robitussin as a kid.
Yeah, that might be it, because I do allude to the cough syrup taste a lot when I have raspberry, which is sad, because I love the fruit, but not wine. But anyway, this sangria is really nice. There is some raspberry in there, but there's also a lot of citrus and orange that really blends well together with the berry. And I think it would make a great sangria. Like, I could just see adding fresh fruit to that and maybe some club soda and serving it on a hot summer day or at like a 4th of July picnic or something. What about you, Rob? Do you have any honorable mentions?
I'd like to shout out two. One I know will be a surprise, the Merlot.
Yeah, shock.
They do have a very solid Merlot, and I quite enjoy that. But the other one I want to give a mention to is their Sauvignon Blanc.
Yeah.
That is surprising.
That's not one that's high on my list. You know, here and there, I think all three of us can enjoy a Sauv Blanc. But theirs it almost made my list. There was something special about their Sauv Blanc that I really enjoyed. And I just, if you were into that, I would recommend that one too.
Yeah, it's good. And I do like a good Sauv Blanc, but yeah. So what about you, Steve? I think you had a couple honorable mentions.
Yeah, I have a couple on the sweeter side. Their Mountain Sunset, which is a Concord blend with Saval and Cayuga. It's just a nice, good wine. I tend to like Cayuga, and the other two grapes really kind of blend into this and make it a little less sweet and a little more smooth. I just really enjoyed that. The other one is peach, and I don't always recommend a lot of fruit wines, but with this one, there's all this beautiful peach flavor, and the aroma is really what gets me. I often joke that if I could buy a candle that smells as good as this wine, I would buy it in a heartbeat. And speaking of vintage from earlier, there is something a little extra special about this year's vintage. It's a bit less sweet, and it just still maintains all that beautiful, rich flavor.
Yeah, I like this year's peach too. I thought the same thing. If I do like a fruit wine, sometimes I like peach. And this vintage this year is definitely not as sweet as previous years. And I really enjoyed it when we had it at our tasting. And I guess that's, we're not experts, but, you hear a lot of people talk about vintage. People that are really into wine pay attention to vintage because they know the year can affect things. And, if you find a year you really like, maybe we're stocking up that year. All right. Best-selling wines. Let's talk about them. I think there's a couple. Steve, take that part away.
Yeah, Tailgate Red is their number one bestseller. And since I recommended it, I absolutely agree. One of the others is the Nittany Mountain White, which one of you two recommended.
That was me. That was me. Yeah. Not surprised.
They also have some award-winning wines that I think would be worth mentioning here. Their Chardonnay, their Linden Vale Rosé, their Riesling, Tailgate White, Nittany Mountain Blush, Moscato, and Mountain Sunset are all listed as award-winning on their tasting sheets.
Wow, that pretty much sounds like our list of recommendations.
Maybe we should be judges.
Maybe we're not quite ready that far yet, but yeah, it is kind of cool that we kind of picked the award ones. All right, well, nobody else has anything to add? I think that concludes it. Let's summarize. Mount Nittany is one of the first wineries in the State College, or sometimes called Happy Valley area. They include local elements in the names of some of the wines that are meant to honor the area. Set along the mountains, they offer a beautiful and serene setting in nature where one can sit for hours and enjoy some wine. For more information about them, such as events or to make a reservation, please visit their website, mountnittanywinery.com, and that link will be in our podcast description and on our social media as well. And speaking of social media, if you haven't followed us yet, please find us under Winetime PA on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it. Thanks for listening, and don't forget to tune in on the first Wednesday of next month for our next episode.
Thanks for listening to Wine Time PA with your host, Rob, Holly, and Steve. We hope you enjoyed our take on Pennsylvania wineries and all that they have to offer. Please be sure to like and subscribe to this podcast. Also, be sure to follow them on social media for updates and news. Remember, when it comes to wine, drink what you love.